Some people have an innate ability to inspire thousands. Some people, no matter how hard they work, will never truly be gifted.
Hey guys, it's Holly here, and before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to go to vandercast.com to download your free guide to annual church giving statements. It's that time of year again, and our friends at Generis have created a free resource to help you think through effective annual giving statements. So check out vandercast.com to get your free resource now. Welcome to the Vanderbloemen Leadership Podcast, where we talk about how to build, run, and keep a great team. I'm your host, Holly Tate, and on today's episode, William talks with Sam Chand, a leadership architect and consultant who's helped many church leaders break through their leadership barriers. Check out TuesdaysWithSamChand.com to receive a video from Sam every Tuesday in your inbox. That's TuesdaysWithSamChand.com. We invite you to tweet your takeaways using the hashtag Vandercast. That's hashtag Vandercast. Let's hear what Sam has to say about building a great team.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again this week. We've been amazed at how many of you keep coming back and how many new subscribers we have to the podcast. It's great to help introduce you to some of the people we get to work with throughout the year at Vanderbloemen Search. And one of those leaders, as Holly's already mentioned to you, is with us today, Sam Chand. A little bit of a backstory for Dr. Chand. He is, I call him Yoda. He's pretty amazing. He's got all this wisdom bottled up. And I met him when our company went through its first major growth spurt, where I really didn't know what I was going to do. I went around and I asked the pastors that I respect the most that are in high growth environments, and I said, who coaches you? Who goes to you for wisdom? Well, a lot of names came up, but one name came up 4 times more than anybody else, and they said, you need to find Dr. Sam Chand. And I remember Pastor Craig Groeschel said to me, William, he will expand your thinking. And boy, he's right. So we're really glad to have you here today, Sam, and honored to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm totally honored to be with you, William, and you are an amazing giant in the kingdom, providing such an important service to the kingdom of God, especially in the times we live in. So I just want to thank you for all you and your team does. You're invaluable to the kingdom of God.
Well, thanks so much, Sam. That is really great. Hey, so Sam, you work with the best leaders that I know, and yet no matter how big the church is, there are just some problems and some issues that are common to every church at every side. One of those is leaders that are going through a hard time think that they're the only ones going through a hard time. But your latest book on pain talks about how that's a valuable crucible. And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about how pastors, no matter what size, go through and how they can learn from that.
The book Leadership Pain took about 6 years to write, William. Part of it was painful to write, and part of it was the book was churning in so many different spheres that I had to pull it together. But the whole idea behind that is that the higher you go, the greater pain that you have to handle. Because people have this misnomer that if I grow from 200 to 500, I won't have the pain that I'm dealing with right now. If I go from 500 to 5,000, I will not have the pain that I'm dealing with right now. However, this is what I know, the higher you go, the more pain you're going to handle. And so the whole book is organized around one simple sentence, and here it is. You will grow only to the threshold of your pain. You will grow only to the threshold of your pain. The more pain you can handle, the more you can grow. So the common denominator is in large churches and growing churches and progressive churches is the level of pain the senior leader can handle. The higher you go, the more pain. And therefore, we have to get away from the whole notion that there will be a day when you will not have pain. There will be a day, but not on this side of eternity. And so I just want to encourage everyone to know that pain is a friend. Pain is here to keep you sensitized to the real issues of life. And most of all, pain is here to help you grow. The pain is the classroom for growth. If you put a ceiling on yourself and do not want to deal with pain anymore, then you have just said to yourself, this is as high as I'm going to go. So, William, much of my conversation, as you know, happens with large church pastors and progressive pastors. one-on-one. A lot of my, just like with you, my conversations are like that. And when you get in the green room, when you get in the office, not the platform, but when you get away from the platform and the people, and really start having an honest conversation with leaders, ministry or marketplace, sacred or secular, the common denominator is, man, I'm hurting. I'm hurting on different levels. And it could be all the way from professional to personal. So the continuum is huge. But it all comes down to how much more pain can I handle? And that is where the propensity is to run. However, if you will embrace the pain, make pain your friend, make it your teacher, learn and grow in the middle of the pain, your future can be enormous. And there's no, even the sky is not the limit. You can go higher than that.
Well, and I think that you are a prime example of that. I mean, people, I thought Dr. Sam Chan, that he must, have this amazing story of being born into the academy and starting at the top. But you really kind of worked your way up through a lot of different thresholds and pain. Isn't that right?
That is absolutely right. Especially when I came to the United States in 1973, went through some horrendous growing times, painful times in my life, all the way from not having food to eat to issues of race and discrimination and so on and so forth. And looking back on it, God was merciful to me, so I didn't do anything stupid or out of line, and God was able to extend His grace to me. But yeah, those were very, very painful times. And that pain, I wish I could tell you, was then, and now it is now, and I don't have to deal with pain in my life. But I don't think you ever get away from that. But neither do I want pain to hold me back from all that God has for me. So many of our people listening to us right now, William, are going through amazing pain. As you know, in the book, I tell real life stories, in fact, written by the people who went through pain themselves, issues in their marriages, issues of insomnia, issues of major depression, just issues of mentors committing suicide, issues of a staff member going down the road starting their own church because the Lord led them to do that, church splits, money drying up in the middle of a building program, and on it goes. And you can see speakers, William, on the major platforms, and those are really good talks and conversations and dialogue, and I think we need all of that. But whenever you see somebody like that on a platform or TV or read their book, always know that spoken or unspoken, they have experienced and are still experiencing horrendous pain in their life on so many different areas. So I just have a greater appreciation for the great men and women who carry the baton of the Lord in marketplace or ministry and help us to grow every day and are not whining, complaining, but know that's par for the course. And the higher I go, the greater the pain.
Wow. Powerful stuff. Hey, let's shift gears a little bit because the book you had out just before that, you've probably written, what have you written, 1,000 books now or...
I've written 13 books, William.
That's awesome. And you really ought to check him out on Amazon. He's got an author page. We're going to provide all those links for you in the bumper of the show and on our website as well. But in the previous book, where we talked about church culture, and I think the subtitle is Cracking the Code. Is that right?
Yeah, Cracking a Church's Culture Code.
Yes, Cracking a Church's Culture Code. This is huge. Culture, Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if you can lay out all the plans you want, but if the culture isn't right, then you're not going to get anything right. So how do you change your staff culture?
I think culture is created at the top and sustained from the grassroots. So for culture to actually change, you cannot start by focusing on the staff. For church culture to really change, you have to focus on the senior leader himself or herself. If someone has been at their church for more than 3 years as a senior leader, you have to take ownership of the culture. I know there was dysfunctions in the previous whatever, but you were there now. And especially if you're a founding pastor, you have to own 100% of the responsibility of a culture. So if the culture is toxic, if the culture is not inspiring, if the culture is disappointing, the first person you got to look at is in the mirror and say, A, how have I contributed to its formation? And B, more importantly, how do I contribute to its sustenance? How does it stay in the groove, and how does it stay sustaining? So once the senior leader takes responsibility for culture crafting and culture creation and culture communication, then we can talk about the staff. It's easy to start with the staff, but it will not be maintained. We can do different things. Staff in most cases want to serve. Staff in most cases really want the best for the church and the pastors. Staff in most cases want their department to grow and to flourish and to be effective for the sake of the Lord and the stewardship issues with the Lord. But the harder place to start is with the senior pastor saying, what about me? Where do I fit into this picture? Am I trying to fix somebody else? And that is not an easy conversation. Not because it's with me. The harder conversation with yourself. And once you're introspective and self-examining and honest, brutally honest with yourself, you'll start seeing where you have created that upline, how you have sustained that. And once you take responsibility for it, then the rest of it can be worked on much easier.
That is gold right there. It's almost scriptural. Something about a log in my eye and a splinter in somebody else's.
I will leave the Bible up to you, William.
One thing I think that one thing I have learned from you, I've said it many times, but the clearest teaching on it from you has been, how do you deal with that team member that you think might need to go? And as the senior leader, and a lot of our listeners are solo pastors and they have volunteer teams. So it might be a volunteer, it might be a staff person, but you've just got a hunch that they need to go. How do you know they need to go, and then how quickly should you act on that?
I talk a lot about that in one of my books called Who's Holding Your Ladder? And Who's Holding Your Ladder? I talk about that the higher you want to go, you've got to be willing to invest in the ladder holders. You cannot go any higher than the people who are holding your ladder. And therefore, if you are focusing on your own ladder climbing skills, you will go only halfway up the ladder. So the ladder holder are your staff, your volunteers. You're only as good as your staff, your volunteers. And let's just call everyone staff. There are two kinds of staff: people who are paid, people who are not paid. So let's just call them that. Now the question that you ask is, how do you know and how quickly should you act? I think that something happens at a hunch. Something happens in your gut. Something starts telling you something is not fitting, something is not right, something is awry. And then you go investigating, and then you start finding tidbits of information here or there, and a collage starts forming. And pretty soon you start seeing that there are things that are not right, that are not fitting. And then you start having those conversations with yourself. The conversations that you have when you're driving to work. You wake up thinking about that person, you go to bed thinking about that person. So there are a few principles I can give you. The first principle is hire slowly and fire quickly. Hire slowly, fire quickly. The second principle is the best time to fire somebody is the first time it goes through your mind. Because to keep them. Now, I say that more for effect than for actual execution. But if you're staying up with that person, if that person is taking away margin from your spiritual life, from your relational life, from your emotional life, every meeting you go into, you think about that person before you go into that meeting. You filter everything as to what that person is going to say or think or put on Facebook. Then that person is occupying just too much bandwidth in your life. And then it becomes either you or them. And then the whole issue becomes, how do you do that? And that is where you need wisdom from There is no classic response to that. Even HR specialists will tell you that you have to gauge every one of them. But I can give you some principles. Whenever I've had to fire somebody, and unfortunately I've had the occasion to fire a lot of people and hire a lot of people too, is that I would start writing down the pros and cons. That's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would say, if I was to let this person go, what will be the aftermath? What will be the fallout? And I would actually write out all the fallout, the people it would affect, department it would affect, work it would affect, money it would affect, ongoing issues of communication. I would write all that down. And then once I've written all those things down, then I'd put a strategy behind each one of them. For example, if it's going to affect somebody in the church that is a substantial contributor and a substantial participant in the life of the church, and it's going to affect them adversely because you're going to fire somebody, you may want to have a conversation with them just after you have made your decision, or even after you have fired that person. Because what you don't want to do is to have that conversation ahead of time, and then they say, Pastor, I'd rather you didn't, and when you do, now you created two different sets of problems, not just with the staff person, but with this person as well. So the second thing I would like for you to do is to make sure whenever you do that, you're going to expend equity. You're going to expend leadership equity. So build up your base, build up your equity base, the goodwill base, the trust base, the benefit of the doubt base. You got to build those things up, because every time you fire somebody, doesn't matter what it is, you will be expending energy. And just know this, that if you have, let's say you got 5 on your staff, and person A is not performing, everybody knows they're not performing, but when you let them go, the sympathy pendulum is going to swing towards person A that you let go. So you got to be very careful when you let that person go, not to be ill about them, not to throw them under the bus. Keep it as matter of fact as you can. And then don't try to justify your actions. Don't look for affirmation. Well, that's a big one. Don't look for affirmation. Don't be telling the story again and again, hoping people will pat you on the back and saying, attaboy, attagirl, you did a great job. Just be secure in that, because I think I've seen pastors do that a lot. And they will go around telling the story, looking for somebody to affirm them. So it's never easy. There's always going to be blood on the floor, and hopefully more of theirs than yours, but there will be blood.
Wow. Super wisdom. That could have been the whole show right there. Thanks so much. As you look out over the world, because you travel all over, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, every continent. Every time I talk to you, I get a different ringtone. You know how you get that beep when they're in Europe? And
I know it.
Yeah. So as you look throughout the world at the church, 2 questions. One, are you optimistic about how the church is growing or not? And 2, where do you see, what kinds of teams do you see God using in the most robust ways right now? Okay.
Number 1, I see the church growing, alive, vibrant, life-giving, progressive. Now, I read the same things other people are reading about the death of the church and demise of the church. I think Winston Churchill was right when somebody told him he heard he was dead, and he says totally exaggerated. I do not agree with the findings because the questions that are being asked and the people being asked and the kind of questions that surveys are asking lead people to answer a set of questions in a certain way. Churches I'm participating with, William, are thriving, growing, taking ground, are really difference makers. And so from my perspective, I just got back from Nigeria. I'm going to Canada next week. After that, I'm going to New Zealand and Ghana, West Africa, India, South Africa. Got back from Brazil 3 weeks ago. I get to travel all over the world, and I'm telling you, churches are doing well. Churches are doing really good. But the second part of your question was, so what kind of teams? I am seeing more high-caliber, volunteer involvement in the life of church. So when the 2008 recession happened, it was not just an American phenomena. It was a worldwide thing. Every country was deeply affected financially by it. And that did a reset not just financially, but reset in the psyche of the church world, psyche of para-churches, psyche of volunteer-driven organizations. And they started realizing that during the late 1990s and early 2000s, when money was plentiful, churches was hired all around. Huge hirings were going on. But then they realized you can't really hire yourself into growth. You have to volunteer people into growth. And volunteerism itself has changed. Volunteerism is coming more from white collars, professionals who are passionate. Instead of hiring 2 staff people, a volunteer who is high caliber, who makes decisions all day long, who organizes, who leads other people in their corporation, can do the same thing off-site. And so I'm seeing a lot of off-site, high-end, high-caliber volunteers being engaged. What I'm also seeing is pastors, instead of just asking for volunteers from the pulpit, are doing what Jesus did. How he recruited his 12, they are going after recruiting people. And I see pastors saying, I see these people in my church. I know what they do for a living. They can do the same thing for a church. And they engage them one-on-one, recruit them, resource them, and then let them lead.
That's fantastic. And very few people I know can give insight about the global perspective and church growth as well as you can. So thanks so much. So sort of rounding out our time, Dr. Chan, we always ask the same 3 questions of every guest. And the first question is, tell me something you're reading that we ought to know about, that our listeners would be invigorated by. And the ground rules are you can't say the Bible or good to great, because that's kind of the answer everybody gives, right?
Now, this is not to patronize you, but you and Warren Bird wrote a book called Next Pastoral Succession That Works. And I want to tell you, I have recommended that book hundreds of times already. It is a fantastic book. Let me tell you how much I think of this book. Dr. Dale Bronner and I wrote a book a few years ago called Planning Your Succession. So I have written a book on succession. I do not recommend my book anymore. I recommend your book. I'm totally serious about that, because you and Warren have done an incredible job. And not only have you written a great book, but the subject matter, every pastor listening to me needs to know, one day you will need a successor. And you cannot wait for one day for it to come around. You got to start doing that now. And the way to do that is to get this book by William Vanderbloemen and Warren Bird called Next. It is never too soon to start talking about this. You don't need to just buy this for yourself. You need to buy a copy for everyone of your board, elders, deacons, whoever, the decision makers of trustees of your church, so that everyone can literally get on the same page. So yes, Next book has affected the kingdom for good and better. And William, churches are going to survive the next succession simply because you and Warren took time to write an amazing book.
Did my mother tell you to say all that?
Well, kind of, sort of. Your mother and your wife and your children.
You're way too kind. I really thought my mother was going to buy all 10 copies they printed, but it's a niche book. It's, very small space, but it's in its 4th printing now, and we're all kind of blown away by what God's doing through it. So thank you so much. Second question. Tell us about an app that you've downloaded that you use a lot or that you have fun with. Just what's on your phone?
Well, I got a lot of apps on my phone, but because I travel so much, I'm in, so many cities and so many different places and hotels. I have found Yelp to be a big help to me. If I'm looking for a close-by restaurant or shopping or, something that I just know is right around here. I know there are other people who have Bible apps and everything like me, but like that, for me, Yelp is God's gift.
That's awesome. I didn't know until recently you can actually search for the closest Wi-Fi with Yelp.
Yeah, you can do a lot of closest stuff. And when you are tired, it's at night, and you're looking for something not inside the hotel, but something right close by, it's a real blessing.
That's awesome. Last question. A little bit awkward, but we've had fun with it. We like to make sure that our listeners know that that all of our guests are human just like they are. So, tell us a time where you're on stage and you completely dropped the ball. You said the wrong phrase or you had a flub up. What would be one example of a fun time that you just kind of dropped the ball?
One of them just happened recently. I was preaching for Pastor Mike Kai in Hawaii, Honolulu, and I was on the platform, large church. I was doing the first service, and the way the church is set up, the first row is no more than 6 feet from the platform, and you are right at face level. And I did not realize till way after the service. I had preached, and then I was in the green room, and pastor says to me, "Hey, Sam, your zipper is down." So I was wearing black jeans,
nice,
with gold zipper.
No.
And the service was also online.
Of course it was.
Of course it was.
I'm going to start Googling right now.
So that's my most recent. But I have an advantage. When I blush, you can see it. But when you do, we can.
Oh, wow. Dr. Sam Chan, be sure and check out his book, Leadership Pain. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Chan. It's been a real blessing.
Love you, love what you do, and I know you're blessing so many people. Thank you for this interview.
Absolutely, and thank you for listening out there. Holly's got a few announcements, a few things coming up. Be sure and tune in again next week. It's always a joy to be let into your life.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Let us know what you learned by tweeting at us using the hashtag Vandercast. And don't forget to go to vandercast.com to download your free resource for annual church giving statements. See you next time.